Hello again, this is UML Operator. All right, in this session, we're going to have three modelers working on the same diagram and elements at the same time. In the previous session, which was called RAS Working Across Modelers and Projects, the link will be included below, we had three modelers cloning the structures of each other's work. This session's a bit different, but follows the same software configuration management practices to ensure the protection of the integrity of each modeler's work. As for the OurCo RAS methods and procedures work effort, I'll cover this in a separate video. Our focus is on what's called Project ECM 2024. ECM stands for Engine Control Module. So OurCo is going to transition their current ECM to a new version for 2024. As we transition technologies and integrate into the OurCo AI, or artificial intelligence platforms. So before I bring the other two modelers into the session, we've got a link to the ECM 1.0, which was deployed last year. And you can see it's a pretty simple component diagram that represents the engine control module. And it has two class elements inside of it, the engine sensors and actuators that are connected to the ECM or ECU algorithms and logic, which is then connected to the CAN, which is a communication interface for our ECM, right? And so in 2.0, the modelers are going to be transitioning this work over to the new language, I want to call it, which is going to be in Python, engine sensors and actuators. So these are now composite diagrams within the component diagram that allows the stakeholders and the modelers, Tony Tech in this case, and then actuators is being developed by Eddie Engineer, as they're building out these units. So we'll be able to navigate the models. You learned how to build cover pages in previous sessions. So I'm just going to get into the two modelers, or the three modelers rather, working together on the same diagram at the same time. So let's get started. We also will be registering this work in Spark's RAS, or Reusable Asset Service. All right, so we've got our three modelers logged in. This is Tony Tech session, this is Eddie Engineer session, and this is UML Operator session. So they're all on the same project cover page, getting ready to start work. Now this session is not going to get into the details of how diagrams were built. We're just going to do some light versioning and then registering in RAS across the three modelers. So the first modeler, UML operator in this case, who's the chief architect, has built out the component diagram for the others to work in. So as the others start doing their work, they're going to focus on their area, right? We're not going to lock this diagram, all right? We can right click in here, find in browser, we're on the diagram right here. We're not going to lock this. We don't need to lock this. We're going to leave it unlocked, right? But if anybody was to start making some changes in this, like if I start to move something, you can see that it has the blue exclamation mark and locks it. So there's a couple of ways to prevent that. The first architect can right click in here and lock the diagram, right? Do a full lock on the diagram. That way the other modelers, when they go into this and we go into browser, you can see the red exclamation mark is there for each one of them. So each one of the modelers can now see that this is locked. And then we'll determine whether we need to unlock this diagram as they're doing their work. But at this point, we're going to have the chief architect lock the diagram while the other or all three of the modelers work together. Remember, at any point, the modelers can collaborate with each other. If we go to Start and we select Chat, we bring up a chat window right here where UML Operator can start a chat session with any of the other modelers. The other thing they can do is they can go to Discuss open up a discussion at the diagram level and start a conversation here, such as, I'm locking the diagram while we're work. Please let me know if you need it unlocked, or something like that. However, I wouldn't lock the diagram, because I have found that as they're moving from discussion and they want to do journaling, it will be locked as well, so they can't do journal entries. I can double check that as we're going through this demonstration. So each one of them, they can discuss with each other in real time, open up a chat session with each other, so they can start a chat session in here, or a discussion as well. And they can see discussions that are taking place after refreshes and so on. So they're able to collaborate in real time as they're working on this diagram. When I'm working with modelers, I also tend to have a Teams video session, or Zoom, or whatever software that you're using, up at the same time. We're able to video conference with each other as we're doing work, but that's optional. Really, the collaboration features within Sparks works well enough as we're working 24/7, 365. So let's get started with modeler 3, who is Tony Tech. And I'm just going to say Tony, Eddie, and UMLO, all right, for the 3 different sessions going on. So Tony's in here working on their model. They're going to go to engine sensors. They're going to Alt-G to find engine sensors in here. And they can either lock from here, right, lock the element, and lock for user. And so as soon as they do that, a blue explanation pops up, and now you can see the other modelers, they're working on this, and we're going to hit Alt-G from this modeler's perspective to go immediately to whatever this element is in the browser, and they can see the red explanation mark, meaning that it's locked for them. And the same thing is going to apply for UMLO, all right? So if they go to this, Alt-G, or they wanted to do some work, for instance, if they right-click on this and they launch properties, they'll be able to see that this is locked. They can't add any intelligence or make changes. Submission is disabled. So Tony is going to drill down into their composite diagram to the architecture they're working on. In this case, they're working on the engine control element, class element, and they also have a generalized version of the engine control as it pertains to UMLO. Because if you go up to UMLO and you look at the engine control algorithm logic, they also have a notion of the ECM, and we are generalizing this so that we can extend it to the engine sensors as well as the actuators work in this case. So we've created generalized elements, and if you understand generalization, we're inheriting everything that's going on in the superclass. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and go back over to Tony's work. So that's what this element is here. You can see that it's referencing that this is generalized by engine control in the upper right. And this is a class element that represents the code for the 1.0 software, which has been transitioned over from C to C++ or C to Python, which is just another variation of C. So if we come in here and we hit function key 12, we're able to actually see the code logic because we're connected to the code repo, repository for the developers, as the engineer or architect is working with them. So I'm going to go ahead and close this. And you can see here is the code for the engine sensors. So a design decision needs to be made how we're going to extend or transition from 1.0 to 2.0 engine control logic. And so we'll get into more of that as they're going through. All right, I forgot to mention a very important point. We're going to go back up to the chief architect or UMLO session. Go ahead and close this. And we're on this main component diagram. And what we're going to do is Alt-G, find this in the browser right here on the package itself for ECM 2.0. We're going to hit Control, Alt, and B to bring up the baseline, all right? Because we want to check when baselines are made. So we have the initial baseline done by UMLO. We have two other baselines that have taken place on this one at this time. And we don't feel comfortable when you're starting your work. What you want to do is you want to show differences, what's taken place within this package since the last baseline. And you can see that changes have taken place to the diagram, and it's really just date and time, really nothing much going on there. There is a new element that has been added. It's probably the note element in here. And what other changes have taken place? So nothing new, just some touching of the model, which changed date and time. You can always see what's changed when it's highlighted. So something happened between this date and time, but no notes, no style, no content has taken place. Same thing here. So nothing to worry about. We're all good, but you want to check your baseline before you start work, because we're going to make changes and create new baselines. So a decision is being made by this engineer on the component. So this is 1.0 engine control. They're going to bring up the properties. They can go to tags. You can always do this also over on the right side of Sparks. And they're going to add a couple of tags. One is going to be status, and the other, going to click on, we're going to add another one. This is work type. Right, so they're going to choose in the status that this is removed, and the work type is retirement. Right, so we've added two tag values, and we're going to go ahead and select OK. So what this essentially means is that they're going to transition from this as the control module to this as the control module. So when they go into this on their generalized version, they can also add status in here as a tag. We're just going to type in status, and we're going to type in work type. Now later on in sessions, it's not case sensitive. I could have just typed work type in lowercase. It would have found the tag value we created, and it would have brought it in. So in this particular case, they're going to put in here the work type on this one, and it is a capability that's being added, and the status of this is still in proposed. All right, and we'll get more into tag values in later sessions. I have a video on tag values, creating tag values, and so on. But now I just wanted to make some simple changes. So in this particular diagram, Tony is now moving this to 02, version 02. All right. Let's look at, see what the Eddie is doing. They're working at the same time. The engine sensors is locked. They're responsible for the actuators. So we're going to double click into this composite diagram, and you can see the same things going on here. They dropped in a note element in here, diagram note element, so the others can see what they're doing, date and time, and they're making very similar decisions, right? So they're moving away from engine control 1. Everyone has agreed on that, but they're going to keep the legacy element, class element in here as we continue to work out this design. This is just for demonstration purposes. So the same thing applies here. The architect can double click on this or go over to the right side, go into properties, tag values. This is their own unique generalized element, so they're free to do anything that they want on that. So we're going to bring in status, and we're going to bring in work type. Bring in any tag values that we want. This is just for, let me do it in lowercase, make a point. So it brought in work type. So work type is capability at this particular point. You can choose any work type that you want. If you got a change request on it, CR, but we're doing this for project management purposes, right? And the status on this one is proposed, all right? So that's on the new one. On the old one, they can go in and do the same thing, all right? Go to tag values, add the tag values, status. I'm just going to do lowercase, and I'm going to add another one. And you can certainly add automation to this, but again, I'm going to cover that in another session. So as elements are being created, let me can't do two things at once here. Put in work type, and they're all doing the same thing. So this one's being retired, and we're going to go to status, proposed retirement, right? So they're updating their elements as they're working together within their architecture. Eddie, in this particular case, is now moving to 02. Now let's go see what UMLO is doing. So I'm going to go ahead and open their primary module in here. We're going to go to tag values, and we're going to add status on the superclass, and we're going to add work type, all right, as they're working together. And again, at this point, the work type is a capability because it's been written out at that level, and this is proposed, all right, as far as status goes. Just putting some tag values in there. Now let's look at something interesting that just happened because we're using generalization, all right? So we all understand what generalization is by now. We're inheriting from the superclass. These are the subclasses that are down here. And we just saw that, and we're from UMLO's perspective, we just saw that this modeler added tag values to that class. But you'll also notice from the superclass, it inherits the tag values from the superclass that UMLO just did in their models. So if we're in this session here and we look at tag values, and this time let's go over and look at tag values here in the lower right of Sparks in the tooling. That's where I have properties. You can see that, well, here are the tag values for this instance, this subclass. Here are the tag values that were just entered in the superclass. So it's updating in real time as the modelers are working together. Now, any one of the modelers can baseline anytime they wish. So we're going to go up to the project package. You can't baseline an element. We're going to go to a package where we can baseline. We're going to hit Control, Alt, and B. We're going to bring up baseline, and we're going to show difference. So any modeler can do this at the same time, and they're able to see that, well, there were changes made in engine sensor, nothing new. There were some new tag values, green means new, that were added to the engine sensor. We're able to go down and see all the changes, new tag values were added here. And this modeler can create a baseline at any time. So what we're going to do right now is I'm going to go ahead and close this baseline. We're going to hit Control Alt B again, and we're going to create a new baseline. So we go to new baseline, and we see that the last baseline was 03. So we want this one to be what? 04, all right? That's our convention as we're going through. Now, modelers are working together. What I recommend is that you see a baseline here, but you don't see who made the baseline. So I just recommend this. You can follow the packages that you want, but in this particular case, Tony's making the change. So Tony baseline, or whatever you want to do, keep it as short as possible at this date and time. They're going to create a baseline. It's going through, and it now created this baseline. You can see in your notes, Tony made a baseline. All right, we're going to go ahead and close. Let's go up to UMLO, and they're on this, and they're doing their work. Let me go ahead and close this. They're doing their work on this 2.0 version of the ECM, and they're going to look and create a baseline. So they go in to do a baseline, and they see, oh, Tony just did a baseline at this date and time. Let me show the differences if I even need to make a baseline. There's no differences, so I really don't need to baseline at this time, so I'm not. I'm going to go ahead and close this and move on. All right, so this next part is the most important part of this video session, and that's that your company, your shop, development shop, modeling shop, has a software configuration management practices and policies in place. They have guidance that everyone should be following based on their roles for doing their job, doing their work. So as you've seen, we've had a modeler do a baseline anytime they want. they're following a convention to ensure that they're putting their user ID in there or their name to reference who made the baseline. And anyone can make a baseline. Baselines can be removed, but who should they be managing baselines? Should it be any modeler for themselves, or should it be some point person designated architect or project manager to manage baselines? And manage baselines means creating baselines, also means removing baselines. So make sure that everyone's clear on who can do what within your modeling project. As you saw, one modeler made a baseline, and that worked for all the other modelers. They baselined a package that they're working on and a diagram that they're working on containing the elements that everyone's working on. And the other modeler came in, saw the baseline was made, looked at a difference. There was no changes, not necessarily for that modeler to also make a baseline. It was already done. These practices also apply to RAS, or Reusable Asset Service. Who's allowed to register models? When should models be registered? How should models be released to other project instances or teams? This is what we're going to talk about next. Now, in the shops that I manage, I allow the chief architect, whoever the lead architect is, lead modeler, them to create registry storage areas. But I also allow any of the modelers, once those storage areas in RAS have been established, I allow them to register their own work. But if you're working in the same package, the same diagram, containing the same elements, any type of elements, you can step on each other and you need to be very careful. But registering in Reusable Asset Service is different than baselining. Baselining is versioning your work, and registering is making your work available for others for reuse. So just keep that in mind as we're going through this demonstration. Now, in a later session, we're actually going to go through a project that sets up the methods and procedures for versioning and Reusable Asset Service. So we built out use cases to support this, these practices between these stakeholders. We built out methods and procedures management for the requirements necessary for the use cases and what everyone's doing. We built out a knowledge base that sets the RAS versioning practices. And I'm just going to go ahead and click into it. You know, the when, what, and how, the versioning steps that everyone should be following, the naming conventions, and so on. All right, so I'm going to close everything except for this, and we are going to register this primary. We're just right click in here, find in browser. We're going to register the package for ECM 2.0 2024. Now in our shop, we have a release practice. So what we do is we tell the modelers, in order to extend software project delivery, they version their models. This is baselining. They follow a naming, they name the version, they follow a naming convention. They submit the work, and then they notify the chief architect for approval, which if it goes down through here, the chief architect approves, and the chief architect versions in RAS. All right, so this is the practice that this shop, this team is following, but I'm going to show you when we go to version that any modeler can do a baseline, because baselines can be managed, they can be removed, they need to be reviewed, and so on. So your chief architect may think that, may say that for that shop, that is the practice to follow. So let's demonstrate that now. Okay, so all the three modelers, they're still working together. The chief architect's going to communicate to the team that he's getting ready to register the project ECM 2024, that they're getting ready to register this. So I'm going to go ahead and expand this. So what the chief architect is going to do is first lock everyone out. You don't have to, it's just a practice. Go ahead and stop work. You might do this at the end of the day when everyone's stopped and is offline, but you're going to go to publish. We're going to go ahead and launch RAS. We're going to log into RAS. We're going to go to where the demo shared models are. This is the storage that's been created for this, and it's completely blank. There's nothing in it at this point, right? So we're going to register the ECM 2024 package. Now, you notice that the diagram is locked, there is an element locked, and there is the actuators is also locked, all right? So what I typically do is when everyone's done, we're getting ready to register something for review by other stakeholders, project management, governance, security, testing, etc. What I normally do is I'll go to settings, I'll go to locks, I'll see in here what is locked and who has locked it. I will select all and I will unlock all. Now, all the locks have been removed, of course, except for the diagram, all right? This diagram is locked as a cover page and is not included in the locking mechanism by users, all right? So now everything is unlocked. I'm in the reusable asset storage area for our shared models. And let's go ahead and register this. So we select the package we want to register. We are in the storage area we need to be in the RAS instance we need to work in. We select register. We also can double check. We see that the package we want to register is pending. We're going to leave the defaults for check dependencies, package dependency import, could be normative, but package dependency and import. And then we're going to set a version. Now, as you remember, your shop may be different. I start everything at 0.1. We're going to put in some comments and some notes in here, and then we're going to select register. All right, so we've put in a current version. We've commented on what this registration event is about, and we've applied some simple notes in here. All right, we're not going to touch any files. We're just going to go ahead and select register. Yes, it's going through and doing its thing. It's registering to the RAS SQL instance, and it is complete. So down here, we, users, authorized stakeholders, can go to content, and they can view each one of the diagrams that were just registered, right? So it registered the entire package all the way through, okay? So that's registered. We have our elements. Each one of them has its own GUID, what type it is, and the name. So all of that's in there. Dependencies, none. Technologies, storage files, we didn't put any in. Review. So review here is where the modelers, let me make this a little larger here. So you've got the stakeholders here, and you can see the stakeholders logged in as UML operator. They can come in and post comments about this initial registration, if you will. All right, so let's put something in there now. So we posted some comments in here under review for this particular registration, 0.01. So let's go ahead and save this. And now that has been posted. Now the modelers, as they come in, they can review this. Other stakeholders come in, they can review this position, and they can also post comments. Let's go over to what Tony's doing. So Tony's come in that following morning, is starting their work. They're going to drill down into the component diagram they're focused on. They're responsible for the engine sensors, you can see here, sensors, and they're going to start their work. So the right click, find in browser, they're right over on what they need to work on, and they're going to go ahead and lock this element because they're starting their work. So lock, user locked, no one else can edit. And now blue exclamation mark means they have it locked, but everyone else is going to be locked out. So they're going to start their work. So what Tony may do is go right into publish, knowing that the practice is to register. They want to see that it's registered. They can go into the right repository. And yes, this was registered. All right. Now, something they can do is what was registered. They can right click on here and they can find in browser, and it'll go, if the project is in the same instance, SQL instance that the RAS repository is, this works. If it's in separate instances, this won't work, but we're able to go right to the package that's been registered, and we can go in and look at the content, and they can do the same thing that everyone else can do. All right. So they're responsible for the sensors. They can look at it. Hey, here's my work, date and time, last done, etc. I'm going to go ahead and close RAS. The other thing they may be doing is going in at the project, doing Control-Alt-B here, bringing up the last baseline and show a difference. They can see, oh, I made that baseline yesterday or whatever the day was, and there's been some changes in here. So what changed? They can go in, engine sensors changed. Really not much has changed because the only thing that's hit is the date modified, and that's just because someone touched it, made a change, and saved it, right? So that got changed. And what was changed? You're able to look at just geometry was changed, right? You can see the position, baseline versus model, and that's the only changes made. So they've done that. So they picking up exactly where they left off makes it very fast and easy for modelers to do their work. And they'll continue to make work. They'll continue to version, baseline their particular views. And again, they're baselining at the package level here. And they continue to do that work. So, and that goes for all the other modelers. That goes for Eddie, same thing, comes in the day, goes through the same ritual. And then UML operator, the chief architect, same thing. And of course, they may have chat, discussion open, and collaborating as they're starting that next session or iteration of the work. Okay, we're going to start to wrap up here. In future sessions, we're going to go through the methods and procedures that follow the very important practices that all modelers should be doing. So in the use case, you have the engineers or the modelers, you have the chief architect, you have a project or program manager or team lead that's managing and working with all the stakeholders. You have your stakeholders, you have governance or a role in governance, and then you have a release team. All right, we're going to go into all of these flows, these use cases, because all of them are very important to managing not only code, but for managing models. So the practices are extremely important, especially if you're following industry practices like SPICE, CMMI, TOGAF, etc. Very important that everyone is consistent in managing and maintaining the assets within their delivery. So today we only covered engineering or RAS processes, modeling practices. We touched on model locking again, but we did not touch on model releases. All right. So release management is very important, maintaining quality controls across your delivery. You're not going to allow a modeler to register something in RAS and then send it out, say, hey, it's there, everyone's ready to use it. It has to be controlled, right? So the release team deals with the testing, they deal with the quality assurance, and they ensure that a particular package or project or elements are ready for reuse. But you can use RAS for collaborating through your delivery or development life cycles. So just like in coding, you have a development phase, then you have a testing and stage phase, and then you have a production phase, a release phase. And you're going to have conventions that tell everyone that's reusing the models what models they are allowed to reuse and when. All right, and we'll get more into that. Can be a complicated subject and cause confusion for people, but it could be very simple or should be very simple if you have well-defined practices in place. All right. Because this is so important in this video, let me cover this before we get deeper. So let's say you've got a release team responsible for releasing the models, all right, that are there, right? And we've got well-defined practices. We'll go over that later on. But what they're going to do, or what they can do, is they can go into publish. They can log into RAS, browse, log into RAS, go to whatever storage area that they want to check on. And in this case, we have a project DCM folder, and we've got 1.0 that's registered in here, but the shared models are in a shared model repository, right, at 0.1, right? I keep these in two different storage folders, right? So when something is ready for release, the chief architect, whoever is authorized to register the package, would go to the actual project storage area and then follow some sort of versioning scheme, whether it's 1.0, 1.1, 2. Something, whatever that is, that says this is the latest release or reusable package for others to use. But we'll get more into this as we're going forward, what practices and processes that you want to follow when you're using RAS and you're using baselining. All right. Thanks very much for watching this video. I know, again, it was a long one, but this is a very important subject that many of you have asked me to do. We went through a lot of material again in this session, and there's a lot more to come to actually show you how to do team modeling using the same diagrams and same elements at the same time. As long as you're in sync, you're following smart, reusable practices and defined practices and processes, you should be good. So until the next session, thanks very much for watching, and I'll talk to you all later. Happy modeling.